As individuals, there are causes that excite, worry, energize, anger, and sadden us. Whether it's a global cause, such as climate change, or a local cause, such as the gentrification of a neighborhood, how we share our thoughts, experiences, ideas about a topic to gain support for a cause is through public speaking. For centuries, social activists, scholars, politicians have made impassioned speeches that have led to mass protests, policy changes, and eventual social and cultural shifts. Before speaking on a major global stage, individuals often first share their views by speaking in front of their friends, family, and social circles. Consider a social movement such as Black Lives Matter, where activists continue to build coalitions of supporters and gain strength in numbers by hosting local rallies, events, organizing protests and boycotts, sharing videos, etc. The list goes on. Through testimonies, research evidence, powerful language, social movements are able to challenge the status quo and to push for social change. So to start, let us define public speaking. When used well, communication and language can be powerful tools, and this is especially true in public speaking contexts. Traditionally, public speaking has been defined as one person standing in front of a live audience and giving an interrupted presentation. As technology has expanded the ways that we communicate with one another, the ways that we engage in public speaking have also changed. Throughout this, we are going to encourage you to expand your ideas about what constitutes public speaking in our contemporary diverse view. We define public speaking in regards to this as an oral communication in which an individual tries to influence others through the use of language. Public speaking includes any communication that occurs in the presence of multiple people in settings such as classrooms, workplaces, communities, political arenas. This communication can occur with live person in an audience or live online or asynchronous audience. For example, public speaking might involve teaching, giving a presentation to a class, delivering a sales pitch, leading whiteboard, giving a TED Talk, you name it, there's a bunch. Influencing others involves reinforcing or changing their attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors, which is a process that requires the use of rhetoric. Now let's take a look at rhetoric and the artistic proofs. In one of the first books about public speaking, Greek philosopher Aristotle defined rhetoric as the faculty of observing in any case of all the available means of persuasion. In other words, to be an effective speaker, we must be able to strategically identify all of the possible ways that we can get our audience to understand our topic in order to teach or persuade them. To effectively persuade others, we have to consider what a prospective audience might think, believe, and value. According to Aristotle, there are three primary ways that we can persuade our audience, which he referred to as the artistic proofs. The artistic proofs are three things. Number one, logos. Two, ethos. Three, pathos. To start, let's take a look at logos. Logos involves using logical reasoning and evidence to convince your audience what you are telling them is true. As a speaker and communicator, you can use logos by making strong arguments that are based in reasoning and that does not use logical fallacies, which is problematic. For now, think of logical fallacies as sloppy or lazy thinking based off weak logic and assumptions. You can also use logos by providing clear explanations and strong supporting evidence, as well as citing credible sources to show that your information is coming from a trustworthy organization, author, or group. For example, if you're giving a speech in which you persuade your audience that your campus needs to build more affordable on-campus housing, you will argue that on-campus housing reduces time spent commuting and allows students to devote more time to their schoolwork. You might also cite a study that found that students who live on campus are more likely to get involved in campus organizations and feel more connected to others on campus. Now, let's take a look at the second tenet, which is ethos. Ethos involves establishing credibility by speaking in a way that convinces your audience that you are trustworthy. Ethos includes three components: good sense, moral character, and goodwill. If your audience believes that you have a good sense, they believe you have useful information and skills that you can be believed and trusted to tell the truth. If your audience believes that you have good moral character, they believe that you are a virtuous person who wants to do what is morally and ethically right. If your audience believes that you have goodwill, they believe that you are approaching the audience with kindness and compassion, that you have the best interest of your audience in mind, and will not try to manipulate the audience for your own goals. To be an effective speaker, you will need to establish all three of these aspects of ethos for your audience to be receptive of what you're saying. For example, you can show that you have good sense by allowing your audience know that you have experience with a topic or have extensive research by citing several credible resources. You can also show that you have good moral character by taking an ethical stance on an issue. And you can show goodwill by treating your audience with consideration and respect. Demonstrating ethos may also mean challenging your audience to avoid making assumptions about you based on their previously held beliefs. Throughout this, we acknowledge that not all speakers will be given the same privileges and passes or heard in the same way by all audiences. We cannot control, and you cannot control, how audience members make assumptions or judgments about your identity, who we are, and what we represent. You can, however, make judgments based on logical fallacies and assumptions much more difficult by presenting well-researched and supported arguments. Pathos, or pathos, involves using emotions to persuade your audience. Pathos is used to elicit emotion from your audience to make them believe in you and what you are trying to inform or persuade. Your goal is to get your audience to feel the emotions that you want them to feel through your delivery. The tone of your voice and your facial expressions are used to convey emotions that your audience will resonate with. The most powerful way to elicit emotion is through storytelling. By sharing stories, we allow our audience to imagine what we're feeling or someone else is feeling, which is then used in turn to create an emotional context for our speech. For example, if you're giving a speech about the need for affordable campus housing, you might tell the story of a student who has accepted to a university far away from home and who was forced to be on an expensive off-campus apartment with a long commute from campus. You will tell them, share their experience being constantly frustrated trying to balance classes. You tell their story because stories sell to the audience, because stories are emotion. By sharing this story, you are tying an individual experience and emotions to a policy, and in doing so, your audience is able to picture why affordable on-campus housing. In addition to these types of artistic proofs as a speaker, you also need to consider kairos, which is the time and place in which you are speaking. The time and place includes both the physical and historical context in which you are speaking, and the time and place where your inner audience will be listening to your message. Kairos also includes considering your audience's expectations for what is appropriate for a particular occasion. For instance, if you are delivering a eulogy at your funeral or at a funeral, your audience will expect you to speak kindly about the person who is being memorialized, not talk about how terrible you thought they were. Kairos also involves finding the right moment to say something. Your message might have more impact and be received with greater sense of urgency if you are strategically choose a time, place, and audience who will help establish more significance for your message. Now, let's take a look at the public speaking purposes. 3 primary purposes for public speaking: informing, persuading, and commemorating. All 3 of these public speaking purposes require the use of logos, ethos, and pathos, and kairos. But each of them emphasize these elements in different ways. Informative speaking, which is one of them, involves public speaking that is primarily focused on teaching or expanding ideas to others in order to achieve shared understanding. Sometimes this involves helping someone become aware of and learn something for the first time, as what happens in classrooms around the world today. Sometimes this involves an expert expanding a complex idea or process to a non-expert audience, such as when auto mechanics explain why your car engine is not running as well as it should. When we are informing or teaching or explaining ideas to others, Our primary goal is to help our audience understand the concepts. Informative speaking often relies on logos, since it is focused on understanding. Though ethos and pathos and kairos also play an important role in establishing believability and relevance. The next type of speaking is persuasive speaking. In communication that is focused on trying to change your audience's ideas, beliefs, and behaviors. Like the title suggests, your job is to persuade. Attitudes involve how we feel and respond to ideas, individuals, and objects, and are a combination of emotions, beliefs, positive or negative evaluations and predispositions, assumptions, or inclinations for how we respond. If you are trying to change someone's attitude or belief, then you are trying to change that person's feelings, unconscious associations, biases, and responses to something or someone. For instance, if you're trying to persuade your audience that climate change is an important and serious issue, you're trying to change their attitudes toward that issue. Beliefs are thoughts about whether something is true or false, or whether something does or does not exist. While changing someone's beliefs involves informing and explaining, a persuasive speech focused on changing beliefs goes a little bit further by trying to convince someone to take on a particular perspective, which may also require changing our deeply held beliefs. For example, if you are trying to convince your audience that climate change is real and is caused primarily by human actions, then you're trying to persuade your audience to change their beliefs. Finally, when we are trying to persuade our audience to change their behavior, we are trying to get them to take action to do something that they have not been previously doing, or to do something differently than what they have done in the past. For example, if you're trying to convince your audience to commute to campus using public transportation or bicycles instead of driving, then you're trying to change their behavior. As persuasion involves trying to convince our audience to change in some way, persuasive speeches need a balance of the artistic proofs. Now, commemorative speaking involves giving a speech to memorize or celebrate an important occasion. Commemorative speeches are usually associated with important milestones in our lives. For example, toasts, eulogy, commencement addresses, the list goes on, are types of commemorative speeches. Many political speeches, such as the State of the Union inauguration, are very important historical types of speeches. While commemorative speeches might include some elements of informative and persuasive speeches, commemorative speeches are primarily intended to add deeper meaning to an important occasion and to help set an emotional tone for the audience. Because of this, commemorative speeches must carefully consider kairos and often rely heavily on pathos. Commemorative speeches have clear expectations for the type of topics that should be discussed, might have built-in rituals for what should have happened during the speech, and rely on carefully crafted language that utilizes many of the same language structures that are often associated in poetry.